Marta's life seemed perfect: a loving home, a caring husband, and a son she adored. But everything shattered one night when her son, Lucas, revealed a terrifying secret about his stepfather. In disbelief and fear, Marta set out to uncover the truth, leading her to a shocking and heartbreaking discovery that would change their lives forever. Her strength and courage were tested as she fought to protect her son from the monster she never knew was in their home. This story is a journey through love, fear, and the ultimate fight for justice, ending in a hard-fought peace that brings hope back to their lives. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Before we dive into this story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Marta couldn't shake the unease that settled deep in her bones as she walked into her quiet home. The comforting routine of slipping off her shoes and padding across the cool tiles did little to soothe her. The weight of the day had lifted, but a new, more sinister dread seemed to settle in its place. "Lucas, where are you, sweetheart?" she called out into the silence that greeted her. The absence of an answer made her heart skip a beat. With growing concern, she moved toward the kitchen, where a small, crumpled note in Lucas's familiar scrawl caught her eye. "Mom, I'm in my room. I don't want dinner, Lucas." Alarm bells went off in her mind as she bolted up the stairs, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Lucas never skipped dinner. Something was wrong. Reaching his door, she paused, her hand trembling as she knocked. "Lucas, can I come in?" Silence, thick and suffocating, met her ears. "I'm coming in." "Okay," she whispered, her voice wavering as she slowly pushed the door open. The room was shrouded in darkness, with only a sliver of light from the hallway cutting through the gloom. "Lucas," she called out, her voice barely a breath. From the shadows, a stifled sob reached her. Panic surged through her as she flipped on the light, revealing her son huddled in the corner, his small frame shaking with silent tears. Marta's heart shattered at the sight. She rushed to him, sinking to her knees beside him. "Oh, my precious boy," she murmured, wrapping her arms around him. "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" Lucas lifted his tear-streaked face, his eyes puffy and red from crying. "I don't want to talk about it," he mumbled, his voice thick with fear. Marta's heart ached with a mother's instinctive need to protect. "You can tell me anything, Lucas. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." But Lucas shook his head, his expression suddenly one of pure terror. "No, I can't, Mom. He'll kill me if I do." Marta's world froze. Her pulse quickened, fear clawing at her chest. "Who, Lucas? Who will kill you?" she pressed, desperate for answers. Lucas buried his face back into his knees, his small body trembling with fear. "Nobody. Just forget it." "Lucas, look at me," Marta pleaded, gently cupping his face in her hands. "I'm your mom. No one is going to hurt you. I'll protect you always. Please tell me what's happening." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Tears welled up in Lucas's eyes again as he hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. It's Ernesto." The name struck Marta like a physical blow, leaving her breathless. "Ernesto, your stepfather. What about him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lucas looked away, the words tumbling out as though they were too heavy to hold in any longer. He hurts me when you're not here." The ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. No, that can't be," she stammered, her mind reeling. "There must be some mistake. Ernesto loves you. He would never." "No, it's not true," Lucas screamed, yanking himself out of her reach. "You never believe me. That's why I didn't want to tell you." "Lucas, wait," Marta's voice broke as she reached out, but Lucas had already retreated, burrowing under his blanket, turning his back on her. Marta remained on the floor, stunned, her thoughts a chaotic whirl. This couldn't be real. Ernesto was kind, loving, trustworthy. Or was he? With a numbness settling over her, Marta slowly rose and left the room, closing the door behind her as if in a daze. She made her way to the kitchen, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she poured herself a glass of water. How could she have missed this? The man she thought she knew. Was he capable of such cruelty? The sound of the front door opening snapped her back to reality. "Honey, I'm home," Ernesto's voice echoed through the hallway, as cheerful as ever. Marta's stomach twisted with revulsion, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had to be sure before confronting him. Ernesto strolled into the kitchen, smiling warmly. "How was your day, love?" he asked, leaning in for a kiss. But Marta instinctively recoiled, her body tensing. His smile faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Marta shook her head, forcing a strained smile. "No, just tired." It was a long day, she lied, her voice barely holding steady. Ernesto's brows furrowed in concern. "Do you want me to order dinner so you don't have to cook?" he offered, his tone gentle. "No, thank you. I'm not hungry," Marta replied, avoiding his eyes. "I think I'll go to bed early." "Are you sure you're okay?" Ernesto asked again, stepping closer as if to comfort her, but she stepped back, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin. "Yes, I just need some rest." With that, she turned to leave, the need to escape overwhelming. "Good night," she muttered, heading for the stairs. "Wait," Ernesto called after her. "Where's Lucas? I brought something for him." Marta froze, her hand gripping the banister. He's sleeping. He wasn't feeling well," she said, her voice flat, the lie leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. "Oh, that's too bad. Should I go check on him?" Ernesto offered, his tone still light, but Marta's blood ran cold. "No," the word burst out of her with such force that it startled them both. Ernesto looked taken aback. "I mean, no, let him sleep. You can see him tomorrow," she added quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. Without waiting for his reply, she fled up the stairs and locked herself in her bedroom, collapsing onto the bed as sobs racked her body. What was she going to do? The man she loved, the man she had trusted with her son's life. Could he be a monster? The thought of confronting him made her blood run cold, but the idea of doing nothing was even more terrifying. She had to find out the truth, no matter what it took. The days that followed felt like an endless nightmare for Marta. Every second was filled with a gnawing tension as she watched Ernesto interact with Lucas, her mind racing with doubts and fears. She scrutinized every movement, every touch, every word, searching desperately for the dark truth her son had revealed. But Ernesto was the same as he had always been: gentle, caring, and seemingly devoted to Lucas. He played with him, laughed with him, and handled his occasional mood swings with patience. It all seemed perfectly normal, yet nothing felt normal to Marta anymore. But Lucas was different. His once joyful energy had faded. He no longer ran into Ernesto's arms when he returned home from work, and the light that usually danced in his eyes had dimmed to a shadow. He became quieter and more withdrawn, as if he was trying to disappear into the background. Marta's heart broke a little more each time she saw her son's once vibrant spirit fading away. One afternoon, while she was preparing dinner, Marta decided she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to talk to Lucas, to understand fully what was happening. She found him in his room, sitting at his small desk, his head bowed over a drawing. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can I come in?" Lucas nodded, his focus never leaving the paper, though his movements were slower, almost hesitant. Marta sat down beside him on the bed, her heart heavy with fear. "What are you drawing, honey?" she asked, attempting to sound casual. "Nothing," Lucas muttered, quickly pulling his arm over the drawing to hide it from her. Marta sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She knew she couldn't avoid the topic any longer. "Lucas," she began gently, "we need to talk about what you told me the other day about Ernesto." Lucas's hand froze mid-stroke and his shoulders stiffened. "I don't want to talk about it," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. "I know, sweetie, I know it's hard. But I need to understand what happened. You can tell me." "I'm here to listen," Marta urged, her voice filled with a mix of desperation and love. She needed to reach him, to protect him. Lucas shook his head, his eyes beginning to fill with tears. "Please," Lucas, Marta whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm your mom. I'm here to protect you, but I can't do that if I don't know what's going on. Please, help me understand." The young boy looked up at her with eyes that carried too much fear for someone so young, eyes that held a mix of terror and resignation. "Promise me you won't get mad," he finally said, his voice cracking under the weight of the words. Marta's heart shattered as she forced herself to smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "I promise, honey. Nothing you tell me will make me angry at you. I swear." Lucas took a deep, shaky breath and began to speak in a voice so low she had to strain to hear him. "Sometimes, when you're not here, Ernesto comes to my room. He says he wants to play with me, but his games are scary." Marta felt the ground drop from under her, the world spinning as a cold, icy fear gripped her heart. "What kind of games?" Lucas, she managed to ask, though the words felt like they were cutting through her throat. "Touching games," Lucas murmured, his gaze falling to the floor as if he could no longer bear to look at her. "He says it's normal, that all dads play like that with their kids. But I know it's not true. It makes me feel bad, Mom." Marta's entire body went numb as her mind reeled from the horror of what she was hearing. She fought back the scream that threatened to erupt from her throat, forcing herself to stay calm for her son's sake. "Why didn't you tell me before, honey?" she asked, though she already feared the answer. Lucas looked at her with tears streaming down his face, his expression a mixture of guilt and fear. "Because Ernesto said that if I told you, you'd be sad and leave us. He said it would be my fault if our family broke up." Marta pulled Lucas into her arms, holding him as tightly as she could as tears poured down her cheeks. "Oh, my brave boy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "None of this is your fault. Not a single bit of it. You did nothing wrong, Lucas. You were so brave to tell me." Lucas clung to her, his small body shaking with sobs. "What are we going to do now, Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. Marta pulled back slightly, cupping his tear-streaked face in her hands. "We're going to get through this together. I promise you that. But I need you to be strong and trust me, okay?" Lucas nodded, the fear still lingering in his eyes, but a small flicker of hope seemed to ignite within him. He hugged her tightly, as if she were his only lifeline. "Good," Marta said, her voice trying to convey a strength she wasn't sure she possessed. "Now, I want you to pack your suitcase. Put your clothes and your favorite toys in it." "Are we leaving?" Lucas asked, surprised but with a hint of relief in his voice. "Yes, sweetheart," Marta replied, brushing a tear from his cheek. "We're going to Grandma's house for a few days." "And Ernesto?" Lucas asked hesitantly. Marta clenched her fists, rage boiling just beneath the surface. "Don't worry about him. I'll take care of everything." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. As Lucas hurried to pack his things, Marta retreated to her room, her hands shaking as she picked up her phone. She called her mother first. "Mom, I need your help. Lucas and I are coming over. I'll explain everything when we get there," she said, her voice strained with barely contained emotion. Then she dialed the number of her best friend, Anna. "Anna, it's me. I need a huge favor. Can you come pick up Lucas and me? It's an emergency." Half an hour later, Marta and Lucas were sitting in the back seat of Anna's car, the world outside the window a blur as they sped toward Grandma's house. "Are you sure you don't want me to call the police?" Anna asked, her voice filled with concern. Marta shook her head, her expression set in grim determination. "Not yet. I need concrete evidence first. Otherwise, it'll be his word against Lucas's, and I can't put him through that ordeal without proof." Anna nodded, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. "And what are you going to do?" Marta stared out the window, her face hardened with resolve. "I'm going to get that evidence, no matter what it takes." The days at Grandma's house offered a temporary sanctuary for Lucas, a place where the shadows of fear and pain began to lift. Slowly, he started to smile again, his laughter filling the air as he played in the garden. Marta watched him, her heart torn between relief and deep sorrow. How could she have been so blind? How had she missed the signs? Each time Ernesto called, his voice full of concern, asking when they would come home, Marta had to fight back the urge to scream. She fabricated excuses, telling him that Lucas was still unwell, that her mother needed her help, anything to buy more time. One afternoon, while Lucas was outside, lost in a game of make-believe among the flowers, Marta sat down with her mother in the warm, familiar kitchen. The older woman's face was etched with worry as she looked at her daughter. "Marta, dear, something's been troubling you. You've been so distant, so preoccupied. What's going on?" Marta took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the weight of her secret pressing down on her. "Mom, I need to tell you something awful," she hesitated, her voice trembling. Her mother reached out, grasping her hand with a firmness that offered both comfort and strength. "Whatever it is, Marta, you can tell me." Marta began to speak, the words spilling out in a torrent of pain and guilt. As she recounted what Lucas had told her, her mother's expression shifted from confusion to horror, and finally to a burning fury. "That vile monster," her mother spat when Marta had finished. "We need to report him immediately. He must be stopped." Marta shook her head, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. "It's not that simple, Mom. I need proof, solid, undeniable proof. Otherwise, it'll be Lucas's word against Ernesto's, and I can't subject my son to that kind of stress without something concrete." Her mother's face softened with understanding, though anger still smoldered in her eyes. "So what are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice low with concern. Marta looked at her with steely determination. "I'm going back to the house alone. I need to get that proof myself." "You're out of your mind," her mother exclaimed, her voice rising with panic. "It's too dangerous, Marta. You can't go back there." Marta reached across the table, squeezing her mother's hand with all the strength she could muster. "It's the only way, Mom. I need you to stay here with Lucas. Tell him I had to go back to work for an emergency, but don't let him worry." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, knowing there was no dissuading Marta. "I don't like this one bit, Marta, but I know you're doing what you feel you have to. Just, please be careful. Don't take any unnecessary risks." Marta nodded, pulling her mother into a tight embrace. "I will." "I promise." Then, summoning every ounce of strength, she went to the garden to say goodbye to Lucas. "Do you have to go, Mom?" Lucas asked, his voice small and full of sadness as he looked up at her with those big, innocent eyes. "Just for a few days, sweetheart," Marta said, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I have something important to take care of at work, but I'll be back soon. I promise." "Do you have to go back with Ernesto?" Lucas's voice wavered, the fear he had worked so hard to suppress slipping through. Marta's heart broke all over again, but she kept her voice steady as she hugged him close. "No, my love, you'll never have to worry about him again. I swear to you." That night, Marta returned to the house, her nerves on edge as she stepped through the door. Ernesto was waiting, his expression a mix of relief and subtle reprimand. "Finally, you're back," he said, his tone hovering between concern and irritation. "I've been worried sick. Why weren't you answering my calls?" Marta forced a smile, her stomach churning. Sorry, it's been hectic with Lucas being sick and all. My mom needed extra help, and you know how Lucas gets when he's not feeling well. And where is he now? Ernesto asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Still at my mother's, Marta replied smoothly. The doctor recommended he stay a few more days to fully recover. Ernesto frowned, his brow creasing with what seemed like genuine concern. And you're staying here? Yes, Marta said, keeping her voice even. I need to go back to work, but I'll visit him in the afternoons. All right, Ernesto said, his face relaxing into a smile. I've missed you. You know, he leaned in to kiss her, but Marta pulled away just enough to make it seem like she was merely tired. I'm exhausted, she murmured, forcing a yawn. I think I'll head to bed early. For a brief moment, Ernesto's expression hardened, a flicker of something dark passing through his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by his usual warmth. Of course you should rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. Marta lay awake that night, her mind racing with the plan she was about to set into motion. She couldn't believe that this man, the one she had loved and trusted, was capable of such unspeakable acts. But she couldn't let her disbelief cloud her judgment. She had to be careful and methodical. The next morning she rose early and prepared breakfast as if it were any other day. Ernesto entered the kitchen, yawning as he took his seat. Morning, honey, he said, his voice still groggy from sleep as he leaned in for a kiss. Marta forced herself to stay still, to not flinch away. Morning, she replied, handing him a cup of coffee with a strained smile. Did you sleep well? Ernesto nodded, sipping his coffee. Have you talked to Lucas? How's he doing? He's better, Marta lied, hoping her voice didn't betray her. But the doctor thinks it's best if he stays with my mom for a few more days. Ernesto frowned, his brow furrowing in mild annoyance. Don't you think that's a bit much? It's just a cold. Marta tensed, her grip tightening on the coffee pot. The doctor knows what he's doing, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. All right, Ernesto said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. I'm just saying I miss the little guy. The house feels so empty without him. It took all of Marta's willpower not to scream at him, not to throw the coffee pot at his head. Instead, she forced herself to take a deep breath. I miss him too, she said, her voice softening. But he'll be back soon. Ernesto nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. By the way, I'll be home late tonight. I've got an important meeting after work. Oh, Marta said, doing her best to hide her relief. That's fine. Don't worry about it. As soon as Ernesto left, Marta sprang into action. She searched every corner of the house, every drawer, every hidden nook, desperately hoping to find anything that could serve as evidence. But the house seemed painfully ordinary, with no traces of the horrors Lucas had described. Frustrated and disheartened, she sank onto the living room sofa, her mind racing. What now? She needed concrete proof, something undeniable, something that would make everyone believe her son's story. And then, like a flash of lightning, an idea struck her. It was dangerous, maybe even reckless, but it might just work. That afternoon, when Ernesto called to confirm that he would be home late, Marta knew it was now or never. She called Lucas, her hands shaking as she held the phone to her ear. Hi, sweetheart, she said, her voice as calm as she could make it. How are you? I'm okay, Mom, Lucas replied, his voice small and uncertain. When are you coming home? Soon, my love, very soon, Marta promised, her heart aching. But I need you to do me a favor first. It's very important. What is it? Lucas asked, his voice trembling slightly. Marta took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to ask. I need you to call Ernesto. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't want to, Lucas finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, sweetheart. I know it's scary, but it's very important. I need you to tell him that you're coming home tomorrow." But that's not true, is it?" Lucas asked, his voice quivering with fear. "No, darling, you're not coming home yet," Marta reassured him, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I need Ernesto to believe you are. Can you do that for me?" Another long pause followed the silence, stretching out like a knife in Marta's heart. "Okay," Lucas finally said, his voice filled with resignation. "I'll do it." "Thank you, sweetheart. You're so brave. I promise everything is going to be okay." After hanging up, Marta prepared herself for what was to come. She knew the risk she was taking, knew how dangerous it was, but she had no other choice. When she heard Ernesto's car pull into the garage that night, she was already in position, hiding under Lucas's bed, her heart pounding so loudly in her chest that she feared he might hear it. This was it. The moment of truth. Whatever happened next would change their lives forever. Marta felt her heart pounding in her chest as she heard Ernesto's footsteps ascending the stairs, each step amplifying her fear and anger. He paused in front of Lucas's door, and she could almost sense his hesitation before he quietly opened it. "Lucas," he called softly into the empty room. "Oh, right, you're coming back tomorrow." Marta's breath caught in her throat as she listened to Ernesto's footsteps approach the bed. She could see his shoes from her hiding place under the bed, and her body tensed when he sat down on the edge. "I missed you, little one," Ernesto murmured, his voice low and sinister. "Tomorrow we'll play our special game, okay? It'll be our secret, as always." The bile rose in Marta's throat as she fought the urge to leap out and confront him right there. But she knew she had to wait. She needed more evidence, something undeniable. Ernesto got up and walked over to Lucas's closet, opening it and reaching towards the back. From her vantage point, Marta couldn't see what he took out, but she heard the rustling of pages. "Our little treasure," Ernesto said softly, the sound of pages turning filling the room. So many memories here. Our secret that was all Marta could take. Her rage boiled over, and she exploded out from under the bed. "Put that down," she screamed, her voice shaking with fury. Ernesto whirled around, his face contorting in shock and fear. "Marta, what? What are you doing here?" he stammered, backing away a step. "What am I doing here?" Marta roared, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and anger. "What are you doing here in my son's room, talking about secrets and special games?" Ernesto's face drained of color, and he stuttered, No, it's not what you think. I can explain." "Explain," Marta advanced on him, her hands trembling with the force of her emotions. "Explain how you've been abusing my son, how you've been terrorizing him." Ernesto's expression hardened, a cruel glint appearing in his eyes. "You have no proof of anything," he sneered. "It'll be your word against mine. Who do you think they'll believe? The hysterical mother or the respectable stepfather?" A cold, humorless smile spread across Marta's face. "Oh, but I do have proof." She pulled her phone out of her pocket, holding it up for him to see. "I've been recording everything since you walked into this room. Every sick word." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Ernesto's bravado crumbled, his face contorting in desperation. "No, you can't do that." "I already did," Marta said, her voice icy. "Now, you're going to hand over whatever it is you're holding, and then you're going to walk out of this house and never come back." Ernesto's eyes flashed with panic, and in a sudden move, he lunged towards the door, trying to flee. Marta reacted on instinct, throwing herself at him and grabbing him around the waist. They crashed to the floor in a chaotic struggle. "Let go of me," Ernesto shouted, trying to wrench himself free. "Give it to me," Marta screamed, her hands scrabbling for the object in his hands. Amid their struggle, the object slipped from Ernesto's grasp and fell to the floor. It was a photo album, and as it hit the ground, it flopped open, revealing its contents. The images that stared back at Marta from the pages were worse than anything she could have imagined. They froze her in place, her mind reeling in horror. Seizing the moment, Ernesto broke free and dashed the door. But Marta, driven by pure adrenaline and desperation, grabbed the nearest object, a lamp from the nightstand, and hurled it at him with all her might. The lamp struck Ernesto on the head, causing him to stumble and lose his balance. With a sickening thud, he tumbled down the stairs, a choked cry escaping his lips before everything went silent. Marta stood motionless, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she listened to the silence that followed. Then, with trembling legs, she descended the stairs, each step filled with dread. When she reached the bottom, she found Ernesto lying there, still and lifeless. Her hands shaking uncontrollably, Marta pulled out her phone once more, this time dialing for help. "Emergency services, what's your situation?" came the calm voice on the other end. Marta stared at Ernesto's motionless body, her voice barely a whisper as she replied, "I need help. I think I just killed someone." The wail of sirens shattered the stillness of the night, growing louder as they neared the house. Marta sat on the bottom step, her gaze fixed on Ernesto's body, the reality of what had just happened beginning to sink in. Her hands still gripped her phone, the operator's voice echoing in her ear. "Ma'am, are you still there?" The operator's voice was insistent, pulling Marta back to the present. "Yes," she whispered, her voice hollow. "The police and ambulance are on their way. Please stay where you are and don't touch anything." "Yes," Marta repeated, her mind numb as she complied. Time seemed to stretch and blur as she sat there, her thoughts a chaotic mess of fear, guilt, and anger. She wasn't sure how long it was before the flashing lights of the police cars and ambulance illuminated the windows, casting harsh shadows on the walls. "Police, open the door," the authoritative voice broke through Marta's haze. She forced herself to stand, her legs nearly giving out beneath her, as she made her way to the door and opened it. Two officers stepped inside, their expressions a mixture of caution and concern. "Are you the one who called 911?" one of them asked, his voice gentle but firm. Marta nodded, her voice failing her for a moment before she managed to croak out, He's in there." She pointed towards the hallway where Ernesto lay. The officers quickly moved past her, followed closely by the paramedics. Marta remained in the doorway, watching as they descended on Ernesto, checking for signs of life. "We have a pulse," one of the paramedics called out. "It's weak, but it's there." Relief, sharp and overwhelming, flooded through Marta, causing her to sag against the wall. Ernesto was alive. She hadn't killed him, but the ordeal was far from over. "Mom," one of the officers said, approaching her carefully, "I need you to come with me. We need to ask you a few questions." Numbly, Marta followed the officer into the kitchen. She sank into a chair, her hands still trembling as the officer sat across from her. "I'm Officer Ramirez," the policeman introduced himself, his tone professional but kind. "Can you tell me what happened here tonight?" Marta took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts enough to speak. I found out that my partner was abusing my son," she began, each word painful to utter. "Abusing in what way?" Officer Ramirez prompted gently. "Sexually," Marta replied, her voice cracking under the weight of the admission. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The officer's expression darkened with understanding. "I see. And you said you had proof?" Marta nodded, her voice gaining a bit more strength. "There's a photo album in my son's room. It has pictures. and I was recording our conversation on my phone when I confronted him." Officer Ramirez leaned forward slightly, his gaze intent. "What happened after you confronted him?" "We struggled," Marta said, her voice shaking. "He tried to run and I threw a lamp at him. He fell down the stairs." At that moment, the other officer entered the kitchen, his face grim. "Ramirez, we found something upstairs. You need to see this." Officer Ramirez stood, giving Marta a reassuring nod before he followed his colleague out of the room. Left alone, Marta's thoughts turned to Lucas. She needed to know that he was safe, that everything was going to be okay. She began searching for her phone, panic setting in when she couldn't find it. Looking for this, Officer Ramirez had returned, holding her phone in his hand. "We found it upstairs. It seems you were recording." Marta nodded, her heart racing as she reached for the phone. "Yes, I needed proof." The officer handed her the phone back, his expression serious. "We've reviewed the recording, and it corroborates what you've told us so far. We also found the album you mentioned." A slight sense of relief washed over Marta, but she knew this was only the beginning. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your partner has been taken to the hospital. He suffered a concussion and some fractured ribs, but he's going to survive," Officer Ramirez explained. "As for you..." He paused. "Based on the evidence we've collected, it appears to be a case of self-defense. However, we'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement." Marta nodded, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. "Okay," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "I'll come." As the officers escorted her out of the house, Marta's thoughts were with Lucas. She knew that no matter what happened next, she had done what she needed to protect her son. And for that, she would face whatever came her way. Marta nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Can I make a call first? I need to talk to my son," Officer Ramirez nodded. "Go ahead, but please be brief." With trembling hands, Marta dialed her mother's number. It rang 3 times before she answered. "Marta, what's going on? It's very late." Marta's voice broke. "I need to talk to Lucas. Please." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "He's asleep, dear. Did something happen?" Marta closed her eyes, trying to hold back tears. "Yes, Mom, something big happened. I'll explain everything later, but for now I just need to know that Lucas is okay. Can you check on him for me?" "Of course." "Wait a moment." Marta waited, holding her breath. She could hear her mother's footsteps down the hallway, and the soft creak of a door opening. "He's sound asleep," her mother finally said. "He looks peaceful, Mom. You're scaring me. What's going on?" "I'll explain everything soon, Mom. For now, just take care of Lucas, okay? Don't let anyone near him, not even if they ask about me or Ernesto. Do you understand, Mom? Promise me." All right, I promise, but I expect an explanation soon." "You'll get one." "I love you, Mom." Marta hung up and looked at Officer Ramirez. "I'm ready." The ride to the station was a blur. Marta stared out the window of the patrol car, watching the city lights pass by without really seeing them. Her mind was elsewhere with Lucas. At the station, she was taken to a small interrogation room. The gray walls and metal table gave it a cold, impersonal feel that made Marta shiver. Officer Ramirez entered, accompanied by a woman in a suit. "Mrs. Valdez, this is Detective Lopez. She will take your statement." Detective Lopez sat across from Marta, her expression serious but not hostile. "Mrs. Valdez, I understand you've been through a traumatic experience tonight, but I need you to tell me everything that happened from the beginning. Take your time." Marta took a deep breath and began to speak. She told them about her initial suspicions, Lucas's confession, and her plan to get proof. Her voice broke when she got to the part about the photo album. They were photos of Lucas," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My baby. How could I not have realized?" Detective Lopez handed her a tissue. "Don't blame yourself, Mrs. Valdez. Abusers are experts at hiding their actions. You did the right thing by seeking proof." Marta continued her story, describing the confrontation with Ernesto and the fall down the stairs. "I didn't want to kill him," she said finally. "I just wanted him to stop." The detective nodded, taking notes. "Based on your testimony and the evidence collected at the scene, it seems like a clear case of self-defense. However, the prosecutor will have the final word." "What will happen now?" Marta asked. "Well, your partner, Mr. Ernesto Morales, is under police custody at the hospital. Once he recovers, he will be arrested and charged with child sexual abuse. As for you..." The detective paused. "For now, you're free to go, but don't leave the city. We may need to ask you more questions." Marta nodded, feeling suddenly exhausted. "Can I go see my son?" "Of course," said the detective. "But first, is there someone you can call?" "You shouldn't be alone right now." Marta thought for a moment. "Yes, my friend Anna. She knows something about what was going on." "Good." The detective handed her the phone. "Call her. You can wait here until she comes to pick you up." Half an hour later, Marta was sitting in Anna's car on the way to her mother's house. Neither of them spoke. Anna had given her a silent hug when she saw her and hadn't asked any questions, for which Marta was immensely grateful. When they arrived, Marta saw that the lights in her mother's house were on despite it being almost 4 a.m. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Anna asked softly. Marta shook her head. "No, it's okay. Thank you for everything, Anna. Call me if you need anything, okay? Anytime." Marta nodded and got out of the car. She walked slowly towards the door, each step feeling like she was carrying lead in her shoes. Before she could ring the doorbell, the door opened. Her mother stood there, with dark circles under her eyes and a worried expression. "Oh, Marta," she said, enveloping her in a hug. Marta collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. All the events of the night, all the horror and fear, came out in a flood of tears. "Shh. It's okay, my dear," her mother murmured, stroking her hair like she did when she was little. "You're safe. Lucas is safe." Finally, Marta calmed down enough to enter the house. She sat in the kitchen while her mother made her tea. "Lucas is still asleep," her mother said, placing the cup in front of her. "He hasn't noticed anything. Now, can you tell me what the hell happened?" Marta took a sip of tea, letting the warmth comfort her for a moment. Then, in a tired voice, she told her mother everything. As she spoke, she watched her mother's expression change from concern to horror and then to fury. That monster," her mother said when Marta finished. "You should have killed him." "Mom," Marta exclaimed, shocked. I'm sorry," her mother ran a hand over her face. "It's just, how could he do something like that to a child? To our Lucas?" Marta felt the tears welling up again. "I don't know, Mom. I don't know." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. "What are we going to do now?" her mother finally asked. Marta sighed. "I don't know. I guess we'll have to talk to Lucas, explain what happened, and then..." She trailed off, the enormity of what was coming hitting her all at once. Then there will be lawyers, trials. God, how are we going to get through all this? Marta's heart ached as she reassured Lucas, her voice soothing yet heavy with concern. "These people, Lucas, they're here to guide us, to help us navigate through this storm," she murmured, her smile tender but filled with a quiet resolve. "We'll take a break from school for a few days, give ourselves some time to breathe, and then we'll figure out what comes next." Lucas, barely keeping his eyes open, nodded in agreement. "I think it's time to go back to bed," Grandma suggested gently, her tone laced with warmth and care. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 4 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. "Can I sleep with you?" Mommy Lucas's small voice carried a plea for comfort and safety. Marta's heart swelled with love as she answered, "Of course, my love," as they made their way upstairs. The familiar chime of her phone cut through the silence. It was a message from Detective Lopez. "Mrs. Valdez, we need you at the station tomorrow. Bring your son. A child psychologist will be there to talk with him. Call me if you have any questions." A wave of dread washed over Marta, her chest tightening with fear. Tomorrow would bring challenges she wasn't sure she was prepared for. As the dawn broke, she woke before Lucas, her gaze lingering on his peaceful, sleeping face. His innocence was a stark contrast to the harsh reality they were about to face. How could she shield him from the harsh truths that awaited them? Descending to the kitchen, Marta found her mother already busy with breakfast. "Good morning, dear," her mother greeted her softly, offering a cup of coffee. "How are you holding up?" Marta sighed deeply, her body and spirit weighed down. "I feel like I've been run over by a truck, both physically and emotionally." Her mother's eyes reflected a deep understanding. "That's to be expected, Marta. You've been through so much, and the road ahead isn't going to be easy." Marta handed her mother the phone, showing her the detective's message. "How do I even begin to explain to Lucas that he has to talk to the police?" Her mother's voice was firm yet compassionate. "With honesty, Marta, he's shown more strength than we ever imagined. Trust in his resilience." The sound of small footsteps on the stairs interrupted their conversation as Lucas appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. Marta's face softened as she opened her arms to him. "Good morning, my love," she said, pulling him into a warm embrace. "Are you hungry?" Lucas nodded, and as they sat down to breakfast, Marta knew it was time to broach the difficult subject. "Lucas, my darling," she began gently, "today we need to go to a special place." Lucas looked up, his eyes curious but wary. "Where are we going?" "To the police station," Marta said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "There are some people who need to talk to us about what happened with Ernesto." The spoon in Lucas's hand slipped, sending milk splashing across the table. His voice quivered with fear as he responded, "I don't want to go, Mommy." Marta's heart broke at the sight of his fear, but she remained calm. "I know, sweetheart, and I wish we didn't have to. But it's important, and I'll be with you every step of the way, I promise." "Will they ask me questions?" Lucas's voice was small and trembling. Marta nodded, her eyes full of empathy. "Yes, they might, but there will also be a special doctor there, someone who helps children who have been through tough times." Lucas frowned, his brow furrowed in confusion. Like a shrink, he asked. Despite the gravity of the situation, Marta couldn't help but smile at his innocent interpretation. "No, my love, he's a psychologist. He's there to help you understand your feelings, to help you feel better." Lucas seemed to think it over, his young mind trying to process it all. "Will you talk to him too if I do?" "Yes, I will," Marta reassured him, her voice firm with commitment. "Okay," Lucas agreed reluctantly, his resolve wavering. "But I still don't like it." "I know, sweetheart," Marta whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm so proud of you for being so brave." An hour later, they were in the car, the tension between them palpable. Lucas stared out the window, his silence speaking volumes. Marta's mind raced as she struggled to find the right words, anything to ease his anxiety, but nothing seemed adequate. When they arrived at the station, Detective Lopez was waiting for them, her expression warm and welcoming. "Good morning, Mrs. Valdez," she greeted Marta before kneeling to meet Lucas at eye level. "And you must be Lucas. It's nice to meet you." Lucas shrank back, hiding behind Marta's legs, his fear plain to see. "He's a bit nervous," Marta explained, her voice tinged with concern. The detective smiled kindly. "That's completely normal, Lucas. You're very brave to be here. Come on, let's go meet Dr. Ruiz. She led them down a brightly lit hallway to an office decorated in cheerful colors, with toys scattered around the room, creating a safe and welcoming space. A woman with a kind face and a gentle smile greeted them. "Hello, I'm Dr. Ruiz. You must be Lucas." Her voice was soothing, like a balm for their frayed nerves. Lucas nodded, still clinging to his mother. "Would you like to play with me for a while your mom talks with Detective Lopez?" Lucas looked up at Marta, seeking reassurance. She nodded, her smile encouraging. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll be right outside if you need me." As Lucas slowly let go of her hand, Marta felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. She knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but she also knew that together, they would find their way through the darkness. As Lucas cautiously stepped into the office, Marta followed Detective Lopez into a nearby room. Through the one-way mirror, she could see Lucas sitting down with Dr. Ruiz, carefully picking up the colorful building blocks, his little hands trembling slightly as he tried to focus on the task at hand. Mrs. Valdes, the detective, began softly, her voice filled with a mixture of understanding and urgency. "I know this is incredibly hard, but to move forward with the case against Mr. Morales, we need both your formal statement and Lucas's account." Marta took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. "I understand," she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "What do you need to know?" For the next hour, Marta recounted the harrowing events, each detail like a sharp knife cutting through her heart. The detective listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her pen moving swiftly across the paper. As they wrapped up, Detective Lopez paused, her expression turning more serious. "There's one more thing," she said, her tone cautious. "Mr. Morales has been released from the hospital. He's currently under police custody, but his lawyer has already filed for bail." Marta's face paled as the news sank in, her blood running cold with fear. "Bail," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does that mean he could be released?" The detective quickly shook her head. "It's highly unlikely. Given the severity of the charges and the overwhelming evidence we've gathered, the judge is almost certain to deny bail. But I wanted to prepare you, just in case." At that moment, the door creaked open, and Dr. Ruiz entered, her presence a beacon of calm in the tense atmosphere. Marta immediately turned to her, concern etched across her face. "How is Lucas?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. Dr. Ruiz offered a gentle smile. "Lucas is an exceptionally brave little boy," she began, her tone soothing. "We talked about what happened, but he mostly expressed himself through play. There's trauma, but with the right support, I'm confident he can heal." "What kind of support?" Marta's voice was firm, determined to do whatever it took to protect her son. "I recommend regular therapy sessions, at least once a week," Dr. Ruiz explained, her voice steady. "It would also be beneficial for you to join him for some of the sessions. Healing will be a journey for both of you." Marta nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I'll do whatever is necessary," she promised. Dr. Ruiz continued, "It's also crucial to maintain a sense of normalcy: school, activities, time with friends. It will help Lucas regain a sense of control over his life." "I understand," Marta replied, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "Can I see him now?" "Of course." Marta stepped into the office, where Lucas was carefully placing the final block on top of a tall, wobbly tower. "Hello, my love," she greeted him, her voice soft yet filled with fierce protectiveness. Lucas looked up, his eyes weary but noticeably calmer. "I'm okay, Mommy. Dr. Ruiz is nice." Marta's heart swelled with emotion, a lump forming in her throat. "I'm so glad, sweetheart. Are you ready to go home?" Lucas nodded, but his gaze lingered on the tower of blocks he had built, a small frown creasing his brow. Dr. Ruiz, noticing this, stepped forward with a warm smile. "You know, Lucas," she said kindly, "you can come back anytime to continue building your tower. It will be here waiting for you." Lucas's eyes lit up with a small smile. "Really?" "Really," Dr. Ruiz confirmed, her voice filled with reassurance. As they left the station, Marta felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that they had taken the first steps, but also an undercurrent of anxiety about the challenges that still lay ahead. Yet, amid this uncertainty, she felt a glimmer of hope, knowing that they were no longer alone in this battle. "Where are we going now?" Mommy Lucas asked, his voice curious and filled with the childlike innocence that Marta fiercely wanted to protect. Marta looked down at him, seeing the spark of hope that Ernesto had tried so cruelly to extinguish. At that moment, she made a decision. "You know what, my love? We're going to get some ice cream, and after that, if you feel like it, we can go to the park." Lucas's face broke into a bright smile, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mommy, ice cream and the park." "Really," Marta said, gently squeezing his small hand. "It's a beautiful day, and we're together. That's what's important." As they strolled toward the ice cream shop, Marta knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges: therapy sessions, nights haunted by nightmares, and days filled with uncertainty. But watching her son chatter animatedly about which ice cream flavor to choose, she felt a newfound strength. They would face the future together, one day at a time, one step at a time. The sun bathed them in its warm, golden light, offering the promise of a new beginning. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Marta allowed herself to believe in that promise. The familiar jingle of the bell announced their arrival at the ice cream shop. The cozy space was mostly empty, save for an elderly couple sharing a quiet moment and a group of teenagers laughing in the corner. "What flavor would you like, sweetheart?" Marta asked, guiding Lucas toward the counter, her voice gentle. Lucas pressed his small nose against the glass, his eyes wide with the colorful choices before him. "Amen. I think I want chocolate and strawberry." Marta smiled, teasing him lightly. "Are you sure? Last time you said strawberry was for babies." Lucas hesitated, a shy smile creeping across his face. "Maybe I'm still a little bit of a baby," he admitted, his voice soft. Marta's heart ached with love. In these tender moments, Lucas seemed so small, so vulnerable, and she wanted nothing more than to wrap him in a cocoon of safety and warmth. "2 scoops, please," she told the server. "1 chocolate, 1 strawberry." As they waited for their order, Marta noticed Lucas glancing around nervously, his small hands fidgeting. "Is something wrong, my love?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Lucas leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "What if Ernesto is here?" Marta knelt beside him, her expression serious but calm. "Sweetheart, Ernesto can't hurt us anymore. He's in a place where he can't get out, like a cage." Lucas considered her words carefully. "Like a zoo?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Marta couldn't help but chuckle softly, despite the gravity of the situation. "Something like that, yes. It's a place for people who have done bad things." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 5 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. "A jail?" Lucas asked, his brow furrowing as he tried to understand. "Yes, my love," Marta said, pulling him into a protective embrace. "A jail, and that's where he belongs." "Yes, like a jail. But let's not think about that right now, okay? We're safe here, and that's what matters." Lucas nodded slowly, though Marta could see the lingering doubt in his eyes. They settled at a small table by the window, their ice creams in hand. For a while they ate in silence, watching the world pass by outside, the soft clinking of their spoons the only sound between them. Suddenly, Lucas broke the silence. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" Marta's heart tightened with a mix of anticipation and concern. "Of course, my love, you can ask me anything." Lucas stirred his melting ice cream, his gaze fixed on the swirling colors in his cup. "Why did Ernesto do those things to me? Did I do something wrong?" The question hit Marta like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. She gently set her spoon down, reaching across the table to take Lucas's small hands in hers. "Listen to me very carefully, Lucas," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "Nothing that happened was your fault. Not a single thing. Ernesto is a very sick person who did terrible things, but you didn't do anything to deserve that." But Lucas's voice quivered as tears welled up in his eyes. Sometimes it felt good. "Does that mean I'm bad?" Marta had to summon every ounce of strength to keep her voice steady, to keep from breaking down in front of her son. "No, sweetheart, that doesn't make you bad at all. Your body reacted in ways it was naturally meant to, but that doesn't make what Ernesto did okay. He took advantage of your trust and innocence, and that was wrong." Lucas sniffled, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. And what if I turn out like him when I grow up?" Marta felt a pang of anguish but quickly moved around the table to gather Lucas into her arms. "Oh, my precious boy," she whispered, holding him close. "That will never happen. You are kind, and you have such a good heart. What happened to you doesn't define who you are or who you will become." They stayed like that for a long moment, enveloped in each other's warmth, the melting ice creams forgotten on the table. The weight of the world pressed down on Marta, but she refused to let it crush her. She would bear it all to protect her son. "You know what?" Marta said softly, finally pulling back just enough to look into Lucas's tear-streaked face. "I think we should talk to someone who can help us understand all of this, someone who can help us feel better." "Dr. Ruiz?" Lucas asked, his voice small. Marta nodded. "Yes, or someone like her. Someone who will listen to us and help us work through these feelings. What do you think?" Lucas hesitated, his little brow furrowed in thought. "Will you go too?" "Absolutely," Marta assured him, her voice full of determination. "We'll go together as a team, and afterward we'll go to the park just like I promised." Lucas's face brightened slightly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Okay, Mommy, but only if we go to the park afterward." Marta felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Of course, my love. A promise is a promise." After they finished their ice creams, Marta and Lucas headed to the nearby park. The day was bright and warm, and the park was alive with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and families enjoying the sunshine. For a brief moment, Marta felt the weight of her worries lift, replaced by the simple joy of watching her son run toward the playground. "Look, Mommy," Lucas exclaimed, pointing excitedly toward the swings. "They're free." Before Marta could respond, Lucas was already dashing toward the swings, his laughter ringing out like music to her ears. She followed close behind, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Push me," Mommy, Lucas called out, his eyes gleaming with a joy she hadn't seen in him for so long. As Marta pushed the swing, watching her son soar higher and higher, it almost felt as if the dark shadows that had haunted them were a distant memory. But she knew too well that they weren't gone, they were just momentarily forgotten. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her back to reality. It was a message from Detective Lopez. "Mrs. Valdez, the judge has denied bail for Ernesto Morales. He will remain in custody until the trial. Call me when you can to discuss the next steps." Marta let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Relief flooded her, knowing Ernesto wouldn't be able to come near them, but the relief was quickly replaced by the daunting reality of what lay ahead. The trial, the testimonies, the painful memories that would have to be revisited. "Mommy, look how high I'm going," Lucas's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. "I see you, my love," Marta called back, forcing a smile onto her face. "But not too high, okay? I don't want you to fall." After some time on the swings, Lucas wanted to try the slide. Marta followed him, sitting on a nearby bench where she could watch him play. She found a small sense of peace in the normalcy of the moment, even if it felt fragile. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Marta looked up to see a woman, about her age, smiling warmly. "Is that your son?" the woman asked, gesturing toward Lucas. Marta's guard went up immediately, her body tensing. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Why do you ask?" The woman laughed softly, sensing Marta's wariness. "Oh, don't worry, I just wanted to mention that my daughter seems to have taken a liking to him. Look, they're playing together." Marta turned her attention to the playground and saw Lucas laughing with a little girl around his age. They were taking turns sliding down the slide, each trying to go faster than the other. "Her name is Sophia," the woman continued, her voice filled with affection. "She's usually very shy, but your son seems to have brought her out of her shell." Marta felt herself relax slightly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Lucas has a way of making friends wherever he goes. He's very outgoing. "That's a wonderful quality," the woman said, her smile widening. "I'm Elena, by the way." Marta took the hand Elena offered, her grip still a bit tentative. "I'm Marta." "Do you come here often?" Elena asked, her tone friendly and casual. "I don't remember seeing you before." Marta hesitated, a part of her instinctively pulling back. "No, we're just visiting my mother," she said, her voice guarded. Elena nodded, oblivious to Marta's discomfort. "That's lovely. Family is so important. We come to this park almost every day after school. Sophia just adores it here." Marta forced another smile, not quite sure how to navigate this unexpected conversation. A part of her longed for this simple, normal interaction to enjoy a moment where life felt ordinary again. But another part of her felt like an imposter, sitting here pretending everything was okay when so much was still unresolved. "Mommy, Mommy," Lucas's excited voice brought her back to the present. He was running toward her, with Sophia right behind him. "Can I play in the sandbox with Sophia, please?" Marta looked down at her son, his face flushed with excitement, his eyes bright with a light she hadn't seen in so long. She smiled, her heart swelling with love and a fierce desire to protect this newfound happiness. "Of course, my love," she said, brushing his hair back gently. "Just stay where I can see you." As Lucas and Sophia ran off to the sandbox, Marta sat back, watching them play. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to simply breathe, to live in this moment. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges they would have to face together. But for now, they had this sunshine, laughter, and the warmth of being together. In that delicate and fleeting moment of calm, Marta caught a faint glimmer of hope, a fragile light amid her turmoil. Marta glanced over at Elena, who returned the look with a warm smile and a gentle nod. "Of course, sweetheart, but stay where I can see you, all right?" Yes, the two children chorused, their voices filled with excitement as they dashed off towards the sandbox, their laughter echoing through the park. "They're adorable, aren't they?" Elena remarked, her voice tinged with a wistful longing. "At that age, making friends is as simple as breathing. Oh, how I wish we could hold on to that ease, even as adults." Marta tried to respond with a smile, but had barely managed to curl the corners of her lips, feeling more like a pained grimace. Elena noticed the change in Marta's expression, her smile fading into a look of concern. "Is everything all right?" You seem like you have something heavy on your mind." Marta hesitated, her heart caught in a tug of war. On one side, this woman was a stranger, someone she had only just met, sharing her deepest worries felt out of the question. But on the other, the crushing loneliness she felt in her struggle was overwhelming, making the thought of confiding in someone, even a stranger, incredibly tempting. "It's complicated," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're going through a really tough time." Elena nodded with a deep understanding, her eyes soft with empathy. "I get it. Life throws its challenges at all of us. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Just then, Marta's phone rang, cutting through the moment. She glanced at the screen. It was her mother. "I'm sorry, I have to take this," Marta said apologetically. "Don't worry," Elena replied, rising from the bench. "I'll keep an eye on the kids." Marta answered the call as Elena walked away. "Mom, what's the matter?" "Marta, dear, where are you? I got home and you weren't there." "We're at the park, Mom. We needed some fresh air." A heavy silence hung on the other end of the line. "Are you sure that's wise?" "Yes, Mom," Marta cut in, her voice firm. "Ernesto is in custody. He can't harm us anymore. Besides, Lucas needed this. We both did." Her mother sighed, a sound laden with worry. "I know, sweetheart, I know. I just can't help but be concerned. When will you come back?" Marta's gaze drifted to the sandbox, where Lucas and Sofia were lost in their world of imagination, building a sandcastle with intense focus. "Soon, Mom. Lucas made a new friend, and they're having such a good time." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 6 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. "All right," her mother replied, though her voice still carried an edge of unease. "But please be careful, and don't talk to strangers." A soft laugh escaped Marta's lips. "Mom, I'm 35 years old. I think I can manage an afternoon at the park." I know," her mother conceded, her tone lightening. "Old habits die hard. I'll see you for dinner." After hanging up, Marta walked over to the sandbox. Lucas spotted her and waved, his face glowing with joy. "Look, Mommy, we're building a castle." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Marta said, kneeling to admire their creation. "And who will live in this grand castle?" "We will," Sofia declared with pride. "He's going to be the brave knight, and I'll be the warrior princess." Marta's smile finally felt genuine, warmth spreading through her heart. "That's a wonderful idea. Warrior princesses are the best." "Aren't they just?" Elena chimed in, having returned to their side. "Sofia is all about princesses who can take care of themselves." The two women exchanged a knowing smile, a shared understanding passing between them. "Lucas," Marta said after a brief pause, "we'll need to head home soon. Grandma is waiting for us to have dinner." Lucas's face fell, a shadow of disappointment crossing his features. "But we haven't finished the castle." "We can always come back another day," Marta offered, surprising even herself with the suggestion. "If it's all right with Elena and Sofia." Elena's smile widened. "Absolutely. We come here almost every day after school. You're welcome to join us anytime." Lucas turned to Sofia with hopeful eyes. "Will you be here tomorrow?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and I'll bring my warrior dolls to protect the castle." "Awesome," Lucas exclaimed, then looked up at his mother with pleading eyes. "Can we come back tomorrow, Mommy? Please." Marta hesitated, her heart torn. Part of her wanted to say yes, to see the joy in her son's eyes again, but another part of her reminded her of the challenges they still faced, the precautions they had to maintain. "We'll see, sweetheart," she finally said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It depends on what we have to do tomorrow." Lucas's shoulders slumped slightly, but he nodded. "Okay, but if we do come, can I bring my fire truck for the castle?" "Of course, my love." As they packed up their belongings and bid farewell to Elena and Sophia, Marta couldn't help but reflect on how lovely the afternoon had been. For those few precious hours, they had simply been a mother and her child enjoying the park, no looming threats, no legal battles, no dark secrets hanging over them. But as they walked back to Grandma's house, the weight of reality began to settle on her shoulders once more. Tomorrow, they would have to face the storm they had momentarily escaped from today. Mommy Lucas's small voice broke through her thoughts as he slipped his hand into hers. "Thank you for today. I had so much fun." A lump formed in Marta's throat, her emotions catching her off guard. "I'm so glad, my love. I had fun too." "Do you think we can have more days like this?" Lucas asked, his voice fragile and filled with hope. Marta stopped walking and knelt to meet her son's eyes, her heart aching with fierce protectiveness. "I promise we'll do everything we can to have more days like this, sweetheart. Things might be tough for a while, but I swear we'll find our moments of happiness, no matter what." Lucas nodded, his small smile returning. "Okay, Mommy." When they arrived at Grandma's house, the comforting aroma of dinner enveloped them as soon as they stepped through the door. "We're home," Marta called out, her voice tinged with a mix of exhaustion and relief. Grandma appeared from the kitchen, a dish towel in hand. "Finally, I was starting to worry." "I'm sorry," Mom Marta said, feeling a pang of guilt. "We lost track of time at the park." "Grandma, I made a new friend," Lucas exclaimed as he rushed to embrace her. "Her name is Sophia, and we built a huge sandcastle together." Grandma's eyes met Marta's over Lucas's head, her expression a blend of surprise and relief. "Really? That's wonderful, darling. Tell me all about it while we set the table." "Yes," Lucas agreed eagerly, his earlier disappointment completely forgotten as he launched into his story. As Marta watched her son excitedly recount his day, she felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. Today had been a small victory, a brief respite from the storm, and as fleeting as it was, it gave her the strength to face whatever tomorrow might bring. As Lucas eagerly helped his grandmother set the table, his voice bubbling with excitement as he relived his adventure at the park, Marta quietly slipped away to the kitchen. She needed just a moment, a brief respite to gather her thoughts and process the whirlwind of emotions that had engulfed her throughout the day. Leaning against the cool countertop, she closed her eyes, inhaling deeply as she tried to steady her racing heart. The joy of seeing Lucas so happy, so full of life, was a balm to her soul, yet it was tempered by the gnawing anxiety of the uncertainties they still had to confront. The gentle sound of her mother's voice startled her from her thoughts. "Are you all right, dear?" Her mother's presence was a comforting surprise. Marta hadn't even noticed her enter the kitchen. Marta opened her eyes and forced a smile, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "It's just been a lot today, Mom. An intense day." Her mother moved closer, placing a warm, reassuring hand on Marta's shoulder. "Do you want to talk about it?" Marta hesitated, but the emotional dam she had been holding back all day suddenly burst. Words spilled out in a rush, her voice trembling as she recounted everything: the innocent visit to the ice cream shop that had turned into a heavy conversation with Lucas, the unexpected kindness of Elena and Sophia at the park, and the chilling message from Detective Lopez. Her mother listened intently, nodding silently, absorbing every word with the patience only a mother could have. When Marta finally finished, her mother wrapped her in a tight embrace. "Oh, my sweet girl," she murmured, her voice filled with compassion. "You are so incredibly strong." For the first time in what felt like ages, Marta allowed herself to melt into her mother's arms, feeling the years peel away as she was held, much like a child seeking comfort. "I don't always feel strong," she admitted, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "But you are," her mother insisted, pulling back slightly to meet Marta's eyes with a gaze full of pride and love. "You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders with such grace. And Lucas, he's thriving because of you." "I'm scared," Marta whispered, her voice barely audible. "Scared that I'm not doing enough, that I'm making the wrong choices." Her mother gently took Marta's face in her hands, her eyes firm yet tender. "Marta, listen to me. You are doing everything you can in a situation that no one could ever be prepared for. There's no right way to navigate this, but you are ensuring that Lucas feels safe, loved, and protected. That is what truly matters." Tears welled up in Marta's eyes, a mixture of relief and overwhelming emotion. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what I would do without you." Her mother smiled softly, wiping away a stray tear from Marta's cheek. "That's what I'm here for, sweetheart. Now let's go and have some dinner. A good meal always helps clear the mind." As they sat down to dinner, Lucas's enthusiastic recounting of his day at the park filled the room with an infectious energy. Marta and her mother exchanged looks of quiet relief, grateful for this moment of normalcy amidst the chaos. "And tomorrow," Lucas chimed in between bites, "can we go back to the park? Sophia said she's bringing her warrior dolls." Marta hesitated, her mind racing with the responsibilities that awaited them the next day. "Sweetheart, we have some important things to take care of tomorrow, remember." Lucas's face fell, his earlier excitement dimming. "Do we have to see Dr. Ruiz again?" "Not quite," Marta said gently, choosing her words carefully. "We need to talk to someone who's going to help us with the situation with Ernesto." Lucas's eyes dropped to his plate, and he stirred his food with little interest. "I don't want to talk about Ernesto," he muttered, his voice heavy with reluctance. Marta's heart ached at the sight of her son's distress. "I know, my love, but we have to make sure he can never hurt you again." "But he's in jail," Lucas protested, confusion and frustration coloring his words. "Why do we have to keep talking about him?" Grandma interjected with a gentle explanation. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when someone does something very bad, you have to talk about it a lot to make sure they get the punishment they deserve." Lucas frowned, his young mind working to make sense of it all. "Like when I break a rule and have to sit in the thinking chair." Marta couldn't help but smile softly, despite the serious conversation. "Yes, something like that, but much more serious." "And after that, can we go back to the park?" Lucas persisted, his face lighting up with renewed hope. Marta glanced at her mother, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. "You know what? If everything goes well tomorrow, maybe we can stop by the park in the afternoon. But I can't promise anything." Lucas beamed. "Okay." After dinner, while Grandma took care of the dishes, Marta guided Lucas upstairs to prepare him for bed. As she helped him into his pajamas, she noticed an unusual quietness in him, a stark contrast to his earlier exuberance. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Marta asked, sitting beside him on the bed, her voice full of concern. Lucas hesitated, then finally asked in a small voice, "Mommy, will we ever go back home?" The question hit Marta like a punch to the gut. In all the chaos, she hadn't even considered the possibility of returning to their old home, the place where their lives had been shattered. "I don't know, my love," she answered truthfully, her heart heavy. "Do you want to go back?" Lucas shook his head with conviction. "No, I don't like that house. It scares me." A wave of guilt washed over Marta, realizing how deeply the trauma had scarred her little boy. She should have thought of this sooner, should have known how the very thought of that house would haunt him. "Then we won't go back," she promised, her voice firm with resolve. "We'll find a new place to live, somewhere safe and happy." "Can we live with Grandma?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with hope. Marta smiled gently. "We'll see, sweetheart. For now, we'll stay here, okay?" Lucas nodded, seeming content with the answer. Then, to Marta's surprise, he threw his arms around her, holding her tightly. "I love you, Mommy," he whispered, his small voice full of sincerity. Marta's throat tightened with emotion as she returned the embrace. "I love you too, my love, more than anything in the world." After tucking Lucas in and watching him drift off to sleep, Marta quietly made her way downstairs. She found her mother in the living room, a stack of papers spread out in front of her. "What are you working on?" Marta asked, sitting down beside her on the sofa. Her mother sighed, her expression serious. "These are some legal documents I've been looking over. I think it would be wise for us to get a restraining order against Ernesto, just to be safe." Marta nodded, the weight of her mother's words settling heavily on her. "You're right. I'll talk to Detective Lopez about it tomorrow." Her mother continued, her tone gentle but firm. "We should also consider getting a lawyer, someone who can represent you and Lucas in court." The word trial hung in the air like a dark cloud, its implications both daunting and terrifying. Marta knew this was the path they were headed down, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel all the more real, all the more inevitable. "Yes, a trial," her mother said softly, reading the fear in Marta's eyes. "Ernesto will have to face justice for what he's done." Marta took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The road ahead was going to be long and fraught with challenges, but she knew she wasn't alone. She had her mother's unwavering support and the fierce love she held for her son. Together, they would face whatever came next. Marta ran a weary hand over her face, the weight of everything suddenly crashing down on her. Exhaustion seeped into her bones and she let out a deep sigh. "I know," she said, her voice laced with weariness. "It's just that a part of me wishes all of this could just vanish, that we could wake up tomorrow and none of this would be real, like a bad dream we could simply forget." Her mother squeezed her hand gently, her touch warm and comforting. "I understand, sweetheart, I do. But we both know that's not how life works. We have to confront this head on. For Lucas's sake, he needs you to be strong, even when it feels impossible." Marta nodded, straightening her posture, as if trying to physically brace herself for the challenges ahead. "You're right, Mom. We have to face this." She paused, a thought occurring to her. "Do you happen to know a good lawyer?" A faint smile touched her mother's lips. "Actually, yes. Do you remember Patricia from my book club? Her son is a lawyer, and he specializes in cases like this, child abuse and custody matters. We could reach out to him." Relief flickered in Marta's eyes as she nodded. "That sounds like a good idea. Could you call Patricia tomorrow and see if her son might be able to help us?" If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 7 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Of course, her mother agreed softly. A brief silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken concerns. Then her mother spoke again, her voice cautious. "Marta, there's something else we need to discuss." Marta looked at her with concern. "What is it?" "Your job," her mother said gently, her tone careful. "You've been away for several days now. What have you told them?" Marta pressed her hand to her forehead, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over her. With everything that had happened, she had scarcely given her job a second thought. "I told them it was a family emergency. My boss was understanding and gave me a few days off, but eventually you'll have to go back," her mother interjected, finishing the thought that Marta was too overwhelmed to complete. "Or you'll need to make a more permanent decision about your job." Panic flared in Marta's chest, her breathing quickening as the enormity of it all pressed down on her. How could she possibly juggle everything, caring for Lucas, navigating the legal battle, and managing her job? It felt like too much, like the world was demanding more from her than she could give. Sensing her daughter's rising anxiety, her mother squeezed her hand more firmly, grounding her. "You don't have to make any big decisions tonight, Marta. Remember, we'll take things one day at a time. We don't have to solve everything right now." Marta focused on her mother's calm voice, trying to slow her racing thoughts. "One day at a time," she echoed, clinging to the phrase like a lifeline. "Exactly," her mother affirmed, a gentle smile curving her lips. "And for tonight, you've done more than enough. Let's take a break. How about we relax and watch that show you enjoy so much?" Marta managed a weak but genuine smile, grateful for the offer of normalcy amid chaos. "That sounds perfect, Mom. Thank you." As her mother busied herself with making popcorn and turning on the TV, Marta allowed herself to sink into the sofa, the familiar cushions offering a small measure of comfort. She knew that tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges, its own difficult decisions that would need to be made. But for now, she would let herself enjoy this brief moment of peace, this small slice of ordinary life amidst the storm. Her thoughts drifted to Lucas, peacefully sleeping upstairs. He was her anchor, her reason for pushing through the darkness. One day at a time, she whispered to herself, a quiet vow. "We'll get through this, one day at a time." As we wrap up this heartfelt journey with Marta, her mother, and little Lucas, we invite you to reflect on the powerful moments we've just experienced together. Life often throws challenges our way that test our strength, our resolve, and our love for those we hold dear. So, what have you learned from Marta's story? Has it inspired you to face your struggles with more courage, or perhaps to lean on those around you for support? We would love to hear from you. Please take a moment to share in the comments below one key lesson you've taken away from this story and how you plan to apply it in your own life. Your thoughts could be the very inspiration someone else needs. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to leave your comment below. Plus, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more stories that touch the heart and soul. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.